Hello. It's April 22nd, 2021, 4:20. That's pretty cool. Let's get high. Which brings us to the subject of time. And when you have time that just goes on forever, there's no middle point. And I mention that because today is a middle point in time, which is in the 50 days between the beginning of Passover and the holiday of Shavuot. When we receive the Torah, we go out of Egypt on Passover. We become a nation, and 50 days later, we receive the Torah and we get married to God. And so each week corresponds to one of the 7 midot. And each of the 7 midot, the lower 7 parts of the tree of life, so we count 7 weeks, 49 days, each day, and today is the 25th day. So we're halfway there, and I remember a long time ago when people weren't quite as athletic. There was this college game, and the guy ran it back, all the way from the end zone to the other end zone, 100 yards. So they asked him, what was it like? He said, well, the first 50 yards, I was hoping they wouldn't get me. The second 50 yards, I was hoping they would, because he was tiring out, you see. But when we hit a halfway point, it really helps us, gives us energy to go the other part of the way. So I was thinking about this and realizing how many things in the world in Torah have to do with half. It's interesting when they counted the people, like everyone had to give half a shekel, like a half a dollar, not a whole dollar, not a quarter. Everyone had to give half a shekel. And then they would count it up and they would know how many people there were. And they would take all that money and they would buy with that the different things that they needed, in the temple or the Mishkan or wherever that, that we were, and people were doing this stuff. And not only that, but we see even the human being was made in 2 parts. And they seem pretty equal, different but equal. And the Torah is very specific when it begins, that the day begins at night, meaning when the sun goes down, the stars come out, that's night. And from night to dawn is half a day. So and it's not a full day until there's also half of light. And it's kind of a teaching to the human being that life is not supposed to always be bright, that life is also supposed to be dark, and that we learn things in the darkness when we don't know how to do things and we don't know how to go forward, even though, the light's shining and you got the lights on, but you're in the dark. And we probably spend like half of our lives in the dark and half of lives being illuminated to something if we're lucky. And when a person makes a covenant, that the idea is to split a thing in half. And in Torah, it's like half stays with the person, half goes with God. And this is a covenant between us and God. I was going to I'll let that one go. And and there's another half. That halfway to the moon is considered the Earth. So, like all the satellites and stuff like we have going around, it's all really part of the Earth. But when you get halfway between the Earth and the moon, you have entered into the spiritual realm. And, it says in Tehillim that, the Earth is to, is to the human being, but the heavens are to God. And we don't really belong out there. We're entering into an area that doesn't belong to us. Be that as it may, it says in the Torah that in the end that God will gather us even from the ends of the heavens, which certainly means the ends of the solar system, because we're not going beyond that. And how do I know? Well, it's interesting when it was maybe, let me see. Maybe it was like 10 years ago that one of the Voyagers, satellites that they had sent out in the 70s was breaking through like I forget what you call it, the ionosphere or some sort of sphere. And it was a big deal because now it was entering out into outer space. But that wasn't really outer space. That was just the beginning towards the real rim of outer space. And what is outer space? So outer space begins when the rays of the sun and the strength of the magnetism of the solar system can no longer hold back the energy. And they thought, well, just then, kind of disperses out into outer space, but that's not what happened. What happened was that all these tiny bits of like hydrogen, it's like the first, the simplest atom, is hydrogen. I think it's like one, the atom is made of, I think, a neutron and a proton. And, there's really nothing simpler than that. And so you have this little atom of a neutron and a proton, which is going out, but being held back by the rays of the sun, which themselves are are hydrogen, and they get to a point where they can't go any further. And you would think that the inertia would push them just out, but it's not what happens. That what happens is what it creates what's called a wall of hydrogen. And now, and it's funny because 10 years ago when they said, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, eventually it's going to get somewhere and it's going to start coming back. Because it's not going to get out. I don't believe it can get out of the restraints of the solar system. And he's out, you're nuts, it's just nothing out there. You got this metal thing and it's going to keep going. And they found now that it got stuck at this rim, because at this rim there are extremely high temperatures that all these little tiny bits of hydrogen have stuck together and has formed a wall and is preventing that from coming back, or that from going further. And who knows, maybe we'll spit it out and it'll start coming back. Could happen, So, I think it's a very cool thing that we are encased in this solar system that is really like it's like a big shell, and we can't get beyond it. And to think it's taken us like 50 years to get to this point. And when it gets there, it can't go any further. And maybe this is what it means, that God is going to gather us and gather all our bullshit that we sent out there and is going to bring it back to us. Because this is really our place. So there's another thing now we have finished the first half of what's called Spheres Omer, the counting of the Omer, because you take the Omer on the day after the first day of Pesach, which means you go out into your field and you find some wheat and you wrap it up with we leave it growing, but you wrap it with something. There's a gumi. It usually means like a rubber band. You wrap it up with something as a sign that this is Omer, and no one should touch it. And then when it gets 50 days later, you cut it off and you take it to the temple, and it's the sacrifice in the temple on Shavuot. The special sacrifice is of bread, which is interesting because Pesach starts with matzah and ends up 50 days later as bread. And what does this mean? That the way the year cycles around Passover, when you get to Passover, it's like the beginning. We like starting our calendar from Passover. Like that's another year of the Jewish people. We don't count our years according to the earth like everybody else does, 5,781, but rather we count it by from the first Passover. And don't ask me how many years that is, because I don't know. I should know, but I don't. But and so how do we start the year? We start the year by getting rid of all the puffed up stuff, all the stuff we did during the year that sort of made us look like we were maybe more than we were. And we get rid of it, and we flatten it down until you were just basically, wheat and water. That's actually how God made the first human being, like needing, water and earth. And so, bread's like a very deep thing. And so we get all the chametz out, which is what makes everything, the yeast is what makes everything blow up. So we get it all out, we eat it. But yeast is not bad. Maybe too much of it is bad, but the whole idea of yeast and growing something and maybe being more than you really are, we're supposed to be more than we really are. And we celebrate that on Shavuot, the only day in the whole year where they have chametz, leaven, inside the temple. And all the other sacrifices of bread and stuff, they're all matzah. Only on Shavuot is it chametz, is it, leaven, cakes and breads and all sorts of different things. And and that's like kind of a celebration, like like a new try at being something. We keep trying to be something. We do stuff. It kind of puffs us up. I did this. I did that. And there has to become a certain time of the year where you say, okay, that's over. That year's over. I did what I did. It's all gone. Because that's the truth. Everything's gone. People want to leave their mark in the world, but very quickly it's all gone. And life moves very, very fast. And so it's good to sort of move with it, to say, okay, that year's gone, forgotten. Let's make a new year. Let's do it right this time. And that's why we start out trying to correct the 7 midot, these 7 measurements that correspond to the 2 arms, the torso, the 2 legs, and the sex and speech. And we tried to perfect these, so then when we celebrate the chametz, and we celebrate the leaven, and we celebrate the blowing up, not blowing up, that is not a good, the expansion is a better word. It says like blowing up these days, you can have the FBI here, but it's the expansion of who we are. And then when we break it back down at the end of the year, back down to the matzah, maybe it's a little thicker matzah, maybe it's a little better matzah because of what we did during the year. So that's sort of like how the Jewish cycle happens. And since it's 50 days from the beginning to the end, So it means that tonight, which we begin then the second half. So the second half is the 26th day. And 26 is a very famous number in Torah because God's name, Yud He Vav He, which where it says in the Torah that God says to the angels, let us make the human being in our image. So everyone says, ooh, God has an image. Who's God talking to? God talking to other gods? So, and our wonderful commentary Rashi from 1,000 years ago teaches us that God is speaking to the angels. Even God creates everything, but now God has created angels. And so he's going to counsel with the angels. What do you think, angels? Do you think we should do it? And, most of the angels there, if God thinks it's a good idea, we think it's a good idea also. But there were a couple of angels there, and they said, I don't think it's a good idea. They're going to do bad things. God's going to get pissed off. The human being is really going to be a very fragile and a very broken creation. Won't be perfect like us angels. So God said, you think you're so perfect? We'll send you down there. You're angels. You're so perfect. You go down with the imperfect human beings and see how you do. And so the way life is set up, when you come out of the spiritual world, which surrounds us everywhere, and come down into this physical world, entities have the ability to do this, and angels, and they take on a physical appearance. They turn into flesh and blood, and you can't really tell the difference of who's an entity and who's a person. Just like it is in this world, everyone's smiling. You can think they're all your friends, and someone will just stab you in the back, and they're like entities. They just came down. So someone once described Bitch McConnell as being a corporation disguised as a human being. So that's sort of like these entities are, and they have no compassion, and they're I'm forgetting why I'm telling you all of this. That the angels come down and they take on a physical. Oh, and so that's what happened. So these two angels, Azza and Azazel, I think, that they come down, they take on a physical appearance, and they just become the worst of the worst. They were just so bad. They would insist on having sex with women just before they got married, and they made themselves king, and they didn't care about God, and they didn't care about anything. And finally, God had to take them up and chain them on Venus, so they won't hurt anybody. And because it's hard to be a human being, and through that we see, even though the human being is imperfect and does a lot of wrong things, we're quite strong and resilient, and where angels can't stand up to it because they expect perfection. We understand each other, that we're all imperfect, and we do things that are imperfect. And when people laugh at us, we can laugh along, man, because we're the imperfect human being, and that's really where our freedom is. We don't have to be perfect. That's why when you go to heaven, you can't really move your place in heaven anymore, because that's where you're at. You can't do good or bad. You're just there, People don't live or die. People just float. That's what happens after life. You just go up in heaven and you float around up there in your place, and you can't really change anything. What you did on this earth is what causes what your situation is in the next world. So in the next world, we're there for quite a long time. And so a person is saying, I'm having so much fun in life. And a person ends their life and says, oh, I had so much fun in life. And at least what I can remember, that was the point of life, is to come down here and have a lot of fun. And it's just not. And because when you go to heaven, you can imagine, you go to heaven and the angels are very exacting. They want to know, what did you do while you're here? And you can't just say, well, I had a lot of fun. That ain't going to get you very far. You have to say, well, you don't have to really have done anything, but your intention. My intention was always to be a good person, or my intention was to help people. I didn't get to help so many, but I wanted to. The intention, that's how God judges us, on intention. And the other thing that I wanted to speak about is 26. Say the gematria of God's name, Yud He Vav He, meaning that each letter has a number attached to it. The Vav is 6, and the Yud is 10, and the He is 5, and the Vav is 6, and the He is 5. It makes 26. And it just happens to be that we're 26,000 light years from the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And the Earth appears to rotate around the North Star every 26,000 years. And we don't actually do that, of course, but it appears that way somehow with this guys. And that's why we can use that as our guiding star, that if you're out in the ocean and you don't know, which way you should, you're stranded in the ocean, you don't know which way is shore. So you can find the North Star, and that will allow you to figure out where you're at. And yes, the North Star. My head is a bit fuzzy today. I'm not quite sure why. I should have something more to smoke. Because we go around the North Star every 26,000 years. And also, the Earth is covered, so the Earth is like 26,000 miles. And here's the kicker, man. Every 26 seconds, and they've been measuring this for the last 50 years, every 26 seconds, the Earth pulses. No explanation why. It's like, the Earth has a beat. It has a resonance, which is the gematria of Tevel, which is the name of our planet. And it has a beat that goes every 26 seconds, and we're all dancing to the beat. And dancing to the music. There's music in the heavens, and there's music on the earth. And truly, all of creation is a symphony, because everything, every movement produces a wave, a kind of disturbance. And that's what sound is. And maybe no one hears it. Maybe seemingly nothing's affected by it, but it's all part of the entire symphony. And how much more so each person who has the capacity to think, to have freedom of choice, and to effectuate through that the entire creation. And one would think, we see from this idea of 26 in God's name that everything seems to be focused here on the earth. And that's certainly the truth, that everything is focused here on the earth. Because only here is freedom of choice. That's why we are physical, and everything else is spiritual. And spirit, there is no choice, because in spirit the light is much more illuminated. And because the light is illuminated, we easily see that there is a creator. Can't see the creator. The creator is not physical or spiritual, but we can see there is a creator. No question, there's a creator. Obvious. So if it's obvious there's a creator, and if it's obvious that the creator is in contact with every bit of creation, and this is not some idea, this is reality. So it's impossible to do anything wrong. Only down here where it's dark. And we don't see that. and we have to, deal with people who say, there is no creator, all Big Bang, and it requires us to choose. Do we lead life with the Creator, not just in our heart or in our head, but truly we go with the Creator wherever we go? And you have to, whether you go on a big trip or a little trip, you lose you leave your security of your home, and you ask the Creator, "No, I hope I'll get it back. I get back all right. I hope I'll wake up the next morning." Everything is in the hands of the Creator, and that's called Yireh Shamayim, fear of heaven. But fear doesn't mean that we're supposed to be afraid of God. We're supposed to have respect for God. But fear it comes from the word yira, fear comes from the word riyah, to see. Because when you see a thing, like, many of us don't like reptiles or snakes or rats or stuff like that. Some people dig them. That's cool. I don't particularly, I don't like them at all. And but you can talk about the rat or the snake or the cockroach or all these kind of disturbing animals, and you don't get so afraid. You see one, you get afraid. And that's the same thing with God. You don't see God. You live in a world where everything is disguised and everything's a lie. And you hear about God, and but you have no fear of God. You don't. Why? Because you don't see that God is here with us, watching what we do and being part of our story, and being either pleased or unpleased, or sometimes, God, because God is beyond creation, God is always silent. But sometimes you can hear the angels applaud or cry, depending upon what we're doing in our lives, and when we become aware of that and sensitive to that, then not that we're always going to do the right thing, but at least we'll be aware enough to know that when we do the wrong thing, we turn to God and say, "Look, man, I know it was wrong. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it, but I had to do it," or whatever our excuse is. But to have that kind of relationship with God, to be able to say, "Hey, sorry, man. I stepped on your foot. I'm sorry. Forgive me," and God forgives. God's like into forgiving. So when the angel said to God, you can get pissed off, God said, "No, I'll learn compassion." And that's what compassion is, when the person is already guilty. We've all decided this dude is guilty. Now we have compassion, because that's the human way. And even something that's been like in the news lately, of this trial of this cop who killed this dude, man, and he's guilty. But nonetheless, they're not going to throw him into a jail with a bunch of black people and let him go at it, because we have compassion on the guy. He made a mistake. It says in the end, God will see all things that people did purposely as a mistake, because we didn't see it with clarity in life. And, and we don't, it's enough that people should be jailed and they'll never be free again. That's a huge burden to carry, because they've taken away someone else's freedom. They'll never be free again. So there is justice in it, but even in justice, we want to do it with compassion. We don't want to do it, with cruelty, and because God's watching, and God loves everyone. God loves the man who was murdered, and God loves the murderer, because God sees the entire story and knows that's just part of the story, that person will, whatever they do in the rest of their life, will die and go to heaven and come back. And maybe eventually, who knows, after so many reincarnations, he'll become like a great righteous person. Maybe perhaps God sees all that. We don't see it. We're human beings. We are obligated Even in severity, judgment, we're obligated to do it with compassion. All right, that's today. Today's Netzach Shabbat victory of victory. Feel the power, man. And so see you next week, God willing. Monday, 4:20. Remember, whenever it's 20 minutes after the hour, somewhere it's 4:20. Good time to get high. All right. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, Shabbat, whatever. Stay high.